Welcome to week 2. I have some tips and tricks to show you this week as you get started in Eclipse. Before I flip over to Eclipse though, I just want to run real quick through our Blackboard course so you can see what we've got going on in there. We have a topic over compiling and running programs, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that inside of this video still. There will be plenty of errors. You will get a lot of experience with errors as you work with Java and as you start learning Java. And errors are not necessarily bad. They can tell you a lot about what's going on inside your program. But it's important to be able to troubleshoot those errors and figure out what's going on. So we have a little lab in there that will walk you through some common errors as you get started and what you have to do to resolve those. And we'll just be using your Hello Printer program that you created in week 1. Then we're going to get into data types. I'm assuming that if you're in this class that you understand what a variable is and what a data type is. And if those are two foreign words to you, you may want to consider jumping into Intro to Programming Logic first. We'll start using the primitive data types this week, and we'll do some arithmetic with them in our topic 4. And then next week we'll start working with some of what are called class variables, which are things like strings, and that gives us our text. So there are a couple of exercises inside each of these units. Down below here, it's just a quick YouTube video on some tips and tricks for Java. I'll grant you, right now you won't get a lot out of that video, except for at the beginning where you can see some of the keyboard shortcuts or the quick ways to make different class files and add in your public static void main. But we will revisit this video once we get into creating classes, and you can see those tips and tricks will make more sense as we go forward. And of course our help form, and then just a little summary of what we've got going on this week. So let's flip over to Eclipse. As you may have noticed last week whenever we created our Hello Printer program, there were a lot of open windows or areas on the screen, and you really only used 3 basic places. You used the Package Explorer, you used the Code View, and then you ran the program down here inside of the console. So we've got some extra tabs that we can close. You probably don't have this one over here, but you can close or minimize these by clicking these X's. Just because you close those tabs do not mean that they are gone forever. You have an option under Window and down to Show View to add those tabs back whenever you need them. Now we won't need them in this course. We will need them in Java 2, and we'll be able to add them back at that time. Sometimes people will accidentally minimize things. No problem there. All you have to do is just click on it to expand it back out again. And again, if you accidentally close this Package Explorer, you can go to Window, Show View, and pick Package Explorer, and this window will pop right back up. We need to talk just a moment about your workspace. You created a workspace whenever you set up Eclipse and created your Hello Printer. And I'm going to pull up my workspace here so you can see it. Inside your workspace, all of your projects will be divided out by folders, and the folders will correspond to the name of your Java project. So I have 2 in there, Hello Printer in week 2 right now. You'll have 2 in there shortly as well. The remote systems temp files, I don't know that Windows users have that. I can't remember. If you have that, fine. If you don't have that, fine, no worries. You may have some other additional files inside of this as well, and it's escaping me right now what it might be. But if there's additional files in there, don't worry about it. But you'll be able to see your folders. And inside these folders are a source folder and a bin folder. The source folder has your .java files in it. And these are the ones that we would be able to open up and read in an editor. The bin folder has what are called class files in it. Class files contain bytecode, and this is what the Java virtual machine runs. It translates the bytecode, and then the program in turn runs. So normally you won't even mess with the bin folder. You won't need to go into it because you are not the Java virtual machine, but you will need to know where your source folders are so that you can submit your .java files to me. I like to keep my workspace link directly on my desktop, so whenever I go to submit things for our class, I can just click on the desktop, grab that, or open up that folder from Blackboard and navigate right into the project folder and into the source folder and upload the appropriate .java files. Switching back to Eclipse, I created just a video sample code program real quick. It's nothing big or fancy or anything, but I wanted to demonstrate a couple components that may confuse you a little bit at the beginning, and eventually you'll get really good at it. To start, I'm going to minimize this because I want you to see the whole program, and I want to point out these curly brackets. So all of our code is going to go in between these 2 master curly brackets. So these encompass the class file. And our class is called Video Sample Code in this particular exercise. All Java programs must have a public static void main. The public static void main is called a method, and it's a special method that the Java virtual machine looks for in order to know where to start your Java program. Eventually, as we get going, we will add more class files inside of one program. We'll create objects off those classes. So so the compiler has to know where to start your program, where to start running your program. And this is basically the method that it will run to start your program. This method is very picky. It needs to be all lowercase, and it needs to have string args inside of those parentheses. And then finally, it opens up into curly brackets as well. In Eclipse, you can double click by your curly brackets, and you'll be able to tell where the opening and closing curly brackets are. So if you have one that opens, you're going to have one that closes as well. Now, as you'll find out from our video, you do not have to type in that public static void main each time. So whenever you go in here to create a class, you put a name in here, you have an option to have that method stub, basically that method put in there for you, so that you don't have to type it all out. And if you put that check mark there and then hit finish right down here at the bottom, you'll see that it creates the class for you, public class, and the name of the class that you gave it, and your opening and closing curly brackets. And then it'll put in your public static void main as well. And all your code is going to go in between these two curly brackets. Now this is just a method, or just a comment, excuse me, that tells you that this method was auto-generated. So that means that you did not type out public static void main. You're welcome to keep that in there personally. I always take it out inside of the public static void main. It's just another line to my code that really doesn't matter. But if you use that whenever you create a class button and use that option to create that method stub, that will ensure that you have the capitalization correct and you've got your spacing and your brackets correct for your arguments in your main method. So inside our video sample code, I've just typed out a couple lines of text. And whenever I'm using just text, I put them inside a double quote. So if you focus in on the first one, welcome to week 2, everything that I want printed in the console is going to be between those two double quotes there. Remember that all of our Java statements end in a semicolon. There is just a couple exceptions to that rule, which we'll talk about whenever we get there. And the system.out.println just tells the compiler, or I'm sorry, the virtual machine to print out to the system. So in the system, that is the console, and the console is built right into Eclipse inside of this program. So whenever I run this, I'm going to use my green arrow up here to run it. You'll see my console pops open down here. I usually keep mine down here at the bottom, but you'll figure out what works best for your workspace. And you'll see the program run. So everything in between that public static void main is going to run, basically, as long as there's no errors. So I've got a couple lines printing out here. There are two different system.out.prints. There's a system.out.println, or print line, and that's going to print a whole line and then put in a carriage return so that the next line begins on the next line. There's also a system.out.print, and this one is just going to print here, and then it will continue printing on this line, and you can see it even continues printing until it finds that line break there. And the print lines are what can give you line breaks. There are also some escape keys that are escape characters you can use inside of your double quotes to put that on another line as well. A trick that you'll see me use in the videos a lot are typing out the words sys out, and then on my keyboard I will hit Control space. That's what I use on a Mac. I think it's the same on a Windows machine as well, and that will auto-generate that whole line there. So let me back that out again. It's sys out, and it's all lowercase, and then you hit Control space, and that will automatically fill out that whole system.out.print line. So you'll see me use that a lot in these videos, just because it saves a lot of time, and I don't have to worry about the capitalization or anything like that. It just automatically does it. Anything that I want to type out, the string I should say, will show up in here. You'll learn what you need to do with your spaces along the way. You can see I put 2 spaces in here so that I would separate them out from this from Kelly, so I have some room after the period. Again, that's just something you'll learn along the way. Make sure that you check and run your program so that you can see the output and make sure it looks correct. There's also keyboard shortcuts to run your program. I think it is Control F11. I personally don't use it that often. I always just run it by clicking the run button up there at the top. So I apologize if that's not correct. You may want to look that up if you're a keyboard shortcut kind of person. The other thing I want to point out down here is we'll be working with variables this week. All of our variables have to be what are called declared and initialized. So the declaring part is this part right here where we give it a data type and then we give it a name. And the initialization is assigning a value to that variable initially. You can declare and initialize over 2 lines, like I've done here. So this is the declaring of a variable called wishful temp, and this is where I initialize wishful temp to a value of 80. Now technically, this value here, since I have just declared it at this time, I haven't initialized it, technically the value would be 0 up until I actually initialize it with a value. That's called a default value, and that's something that you'll read about in the textbook as well. All of our variables, all of our variables and all of our data types, they all have a default value, and that will that if we don't assign them a value, that's the value it will be. And with an integer, the default value is 0. You can see Eclipse is giving me a little helpful hint here. It's saying that I have created this variable, but I haven't used it anywhere. So this is not technically an error. This is, again, just to let you know, hey, you created this, but you haven't used it yet. So if you finish up your program and you see some of these where you've created a local variable, but it's not used, that means you probably don't need it in your program, and you can remove it out of there. Our next line shows where I've combined some text with a variable. So all the text that I want to type, or that I want printed, will go within my double quotes. And then I use this plus sign, and this plus sign is essentially going to append the value that's inside of temperature, or temp, to this particular line. I can also nest these variables in here, and everything is just separated with a plus sign. So if you think back to when you were a kid, maybe you had those trains that had the little magnets in between them that spelled out a word or spelled out your name. You can think of those plus signs as the magnets in between the trains, and that's what connects all the words together. So now if I run this, if I save and run this, one thing that I will almost always do in all my programs is hit this play button here, and it'll ask me, do I always want to save the resources before launching it? Yes. It takes out an extra step. So now all I have to do is hit run. It's going to save it, compile it, and then run it. So if you look down here at the bottom, now you can see when I woke up this morning it was, and then here's the value that was inside of temp, and then it appends that period to the end. So double check to make sure that all of your variables are set out with a plus sign in order to append them all together. If I leave them out, Eclipse will tell me that I have an error. I haven't appended this to the end. It's saying I either need to, basically it's telling me I need to delete this because it's not valid, but I can also add in the plus sign, and it will make it so that, oh, okay, this is to be treated as part of the string. You're just going to add this component to the end. I can save it. Please take time to read about creating good variables inside of your text this week, and you'll want to make sure that you're following camel casing for writing out your variables. So camel casing means that everything is lowercase except whenever there's another word, and the first letter of that word is uppercase as well. So if this variable was called my wishful temp, I would capitalize the W and the T for wishful temp because all subsequent words, the first letter would be capitalized. Other programming languages might use something like Pascal case or use underscores to separate words, but in Java for regular variables we use camel casing. And then for what are called constant variables or final variables, we use all uppercase for the whole word, and then we separate each word by an underscore. And we will talk about constant variables very soon as well. So let's talk about quickly what happens whenever I push this green play button up here. So my first thing I, of course, have to do is to type my source code, and that's what this whole section right here is. This is source code. Whenever I click this green play button, what is happening in the background is Eclipse is compiling the source code using a Java compiler. And that compiler is generating a class file that is filled with the bytecode. So if I look inside my week 2 folder, here is my source code, my videosample.java, and inside my bin is my class file that is filled with bytecode. The bytecode is read by the Java virtual machine. So after we press that green play button, and the compiler generates this class file with the bytecode, the Java virtual machine launches inside of Eclipse in order to run the bytecode. So the Java virtual machine starts up, the bytecode is translated inside the Java virtual machine, and then we see down here at the bottom the program runs. So you can see how quickly this all happens, very quickly. I've provided a video in the course content for the week So you can see the way that we used to do it. Whenever I learned Java, we didn't have beautiful IDEs like this. Instead, we coded our source code in Notepad, and then we launched the command prompt, and we went in, we Java seed, or we Java compiled the source code, and then we started the Java virtual machines, and then we loaded in our bytecode, and finally the Java virtual machine translated our bytecode, and our program ran. I always had a Java C and then Java in order to run those projects, and now all I have to do is just push this beautiful little green button up here, and it's all taken care of. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. I know you probably don't appreciate it, but there's a lot of cool things that go on back behind there to save us a lot of time. The final component that we have going on in our week 2 folder is working with some very basic arithmetic, doing some addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. I think that's pretty straightforward. You can opt to do the math inside of a statement like this, or you can create another variable and store those into it. Now, I do want to caution you about using what are called magic numbers. We'll learn more about magic numbers next week. But you want to make sure that if you have a number inside of your code, that is held inside of a variable so that those numbers just don't appear. And again, we'll talk more about that next week. Do pay attention as you submit things this week. If there are any issues or problems, I'll write them out in the comments. And as a reminder, you can revise and resubmit them for an opportunity to earn full credit. If you have any questions, please let me know. I hope you enjoy getting started with Java this week, and I look forward to seeing you online. Have a great week.